Oh, David, do I also have screen sharing permission to show the study sheet?
You're co-host, so you should have permission. Yes. Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, good.
All right, letting people in now.
Wow, well, Shabbat Shalom to everybody. I admit I was concerned we might not have a minyan, but I guess that's not going to be a problem.
Nope.
I will follow Rabbi Schatz's lead and say Shabbat Shalom to Joanna, to Diane, who's in the other room, to Rick, to Marizan and Joseph. Is Joseph around, Marizan? Okay. To Irv, who it's great to see. Used to sit behind me in Daily Minyan back when we were together. To Marshall, to Ed, to Tybel, and to Stan. And I saw Lillian. There's Lillian. Now there she is. So Shabbat Shalom to everybody. We're going to begin with Mincha. I don't have the page number for the big
computer. Oh, you're listening on your headset.
Yeah, so everybody has to mute themselves. In any case, I have the page numbers for the Slim Shalom, the gray Shabbat Slim Shalom is page 226. In the Lev Shalem, it's on page 214. And we begin with Ashrei. Ashrei Oshvei Beitecha, Orilu Chasela, Ashrei Am Shchachalo, Ashrei Am Shanoi Lohav, Tila LeDavid. Tov Analakov, Rachamav Kol Ma'asav. Einei chol lecha yasaberu, v'yata noten lahem menachlam bito, potech et yadecha, u'maspi locho charatzon, tzadik Adonai, b'chol derachav, v'chasi b'chol ma'asav. Tehilat Adonai repi, v'reicho basar shem kachol ilam va'ed, v'anachnu nebarechya, netavilam hallelujah. Uval Etzion Goel, Ushavei Pesha B'Yakov Numaronoi. V'yata Kadosh Yoshev Tilot Yisrael, V'kara Zel Zel V'yamar, Kadosh Kadosh Kadosh, Adonai Tzvot Melech Haaretz Kivodo, U'mekablim Dein Midin. Batisa eni rach v'yashma acharai, kol rash gadol, aruch kivod Adonai, mim komo. Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Tzedekatecha tzedek le'olam v'toratecha emet. Yirasum efanecha, no Eloheinu v'yavotenu, shnishmoch l'tachem v'mazev, v'nizkeh v'nicheh v'niran rash tuba v'racha, l'shnei mot Mashiach, u'chayom haba. V'yivdechu v'chayodei shemecha, ki lo azavta dershecha Adonai, Adonai chafetz l'man sidko, yagdil Torah v'yadir. So we turn to the Torah service, which is reading the first Aliyah from next week. And the first Aliyah will be from Acharemot. Next week, we have a combined Parsha Acharemot Kedoshim. And so I think we're going to turn to Joanna to say the bracha and read the first Aliyah divided into 3 for us.
Yes, so Shabbat Shalom, everyone. For those who may be following in a Tanakh or otherwise not have the page number, we're reading from the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 1. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה.
אמן.
וידבר אדוני אל משה אחרי מות שני בני אהרון בקרבתם לפני אדוני וימותו. ויאמר אדוני אל משה דבר אל אהרון אחיך ואל יבוא בכל עת אל הקודש מבית לפרוכת אל פני הכפורת אשר על הארון ולא ימות כי בענן אראה על הכפורת. בזאת יבוא אהרון אל הקודש בפר בן בקר לחטאת ועיל לעולה כתונת בד קודש ילבש ומכנסי בד יהיו על בשרו ובאבני בד יחקור ובמצנפת בד יצנוף בגדי קודש הם ורחץ במים את בשרו ובשם ומאת עדת בני ישראל ייקח שני שעירי עזים לחטאת ועיל אחד לעולם. והקריב אהרון את פר החטאת אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו. The next aliyah continues with verse 7. ולקח את שני השעירים והעמיד אותם לפני אדוני פתח אוהל מועד. ונתן אהרון על שני השעירים גורלות, גורל אחד לאדוני וגורל אחד לעזאזל. והקריב אהרון את השעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לאדוני ועשהו חטאת. והשעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לעזאזל יעמד חי לפני אדוני לכפר עליו לשלח אותו לעזאזל המדברה. והקריב אהרון את פר החטאת אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו ושחט את פר החטאת אשר לו. The third aliyah begins with verse 12. ולקח מלוא המחתה גחלי אש מעל המזבח מלפני אדוני ומלוא חופניו כתורת סמים דקה והביא מבית לפרוכת ונתן את הקטורת על האש לפני אדוני וכיסה ענן הקטורת את הכפורת אשר על העדות ולא ימות. ולקח מדם הפר והיזה באצבעו על פני הכפורת כהדמה ולפני הכפורת יזה 7 פעמים מן הדם באצבעו ושחט את שעיר החטאת אשר לעם, והביא את עמו אל מבית לפרוכת, ועשה את עמו כאשר עשה לדם הפר, והיזה אותו על הכפורת ולפני הכפורת, וכיפר על הקודש מטומאות בני ישראל ומפשעיהם לכל חטאותם, וכן יעצר לאוהל מועד השוכן איתם בתוך טומאותם, וכל אדם לא יהיה באוהל מועד בבואו לכפר בקודש עד צאתו, וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו ובעד כל קהל ישראל.
Yasher Kochev, thank you for the Torah reading. So I neglected to check with the rabbis, but I believe that today is the first opportunity to do an El Male Rachamim, since we've had the break over the entire month of Nisan and the first part of Iyar. So is there anybody who needs an El Male said? Lillian? Can we unmute Lillian? Lillian?
Larry,
And who is this for?
my mommy.
And would you like to do it, or?
No, you could do it. You can do it for me, Larry.
All right, so give me 1 second. Go back to where the Elmalis are.
You've given him the opportunity.
I have to go to the weekday book. I'll find it in a second.
Thank you so much, Larry.
And here we are. And your mother's name?
Necha,
Necha?
bat Yankel Velea.
Necha bat Yankov Alea. I hope I remember. If I don't, you'll correct me.
Mm-hmm.
El Male Rachamim Shochem Bamromim Hamatzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kafei Hashchina B'ma'alo Kedoshim U'Toarim K'Zohar HaRekia Mazirim L'Nishmat Nachat Ben Yankel
Leah.
Ve'Leah Shelchal Olama Bagen Ad Gan Eden Tehei Menuchata Ana Ba'al Rachamim, Hastireha Beseter Knafeha L'Olamim, Utzvur B'tzvur HaChayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachlata, V'tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava, V'nomar Amen.
Amen.
Would you like to say a few words about your mother?
Sure. So Nellie Gelberg, I was very, very close to my mommy, and I miss her tons all the time. I go in the backyard and I talk to her and seek guidance all the time. And she grew up in a town near Siget, where Elie Wiesel came from. Her town, she says it was like North Hollywood and Los Angeles. It was like the little village next to the little village. Her village was Sarvash, and survived Auschwitz, Dachau, and the Death March, and was just a remarkable, I said, Mommy, how did you do this? And she just has this survival gene that I see coming out in other parts of our family. And when she was very, very ill her last few years of life and had her full mind the whole time, and she goes, Mamala, I don't know why I still want to live. I can't walk by myself. I can't brush my teeth. She goes, don't tell anybody, but I can't even go to the bathroom by myself. But somehow I still want to live. and she would grow tomatoes for the whole neighborhood and make chicken soup to people would come with their jars, and she would feed them with chicken soup to help them get better. She was a dressmaker and a beautiful dressmaker and loved her customers and was very devoted to us and family.
Fantastically inspiring story. May her memory continue to be a blessing for you and for all of your family and everybody who knew her and everybody who hears about her.
Thank you, Larry.
Is today the actual yard site?
It's actually tomorrow night.
Okay, good. So you won't be saying Kaddish. Anybody else? All right, so we're going to continue with the Amidah, which you'll all say silently by yourselves. It's found on page 234 of Sim Shalom, and it's on page 223 of Lev Shalem. Shabbat Mincha has always been a very special service to me and to my family. And although we don't repeat the Amidah, and I know that we don't traditionally do this, there's nothing wrong with our singing a song. And I'd like us to go back to page 236 in the Sim Shalom, or page 226 in Lev Shalem, and just sing together the bracha that we sing, the preliminary to the bracha, the special that's recited only on Shabbat afternoon. And I think the words are actually beautiful as well. אתה אחד ושמך אחד ומקיימך ישראל גוי אחד בארץ תפארת גדולה ועטרת ישועה יום מנוחה וקדושה לעמך נתת יום מנוחה וקדושה לעמך נתת אברהם יגל יצחק ירנן יעקב ובניו ינוחו בו יעקב ובניו ינוחו בו מנוחת אהבת ונדבה מנוחת אמת ואמונה מנוחה שלום ושלווה והשקט בבטח מנוחה שלווה שמה שאתה רוצה בה יכירו בניך וידעו כי מאיתך היא מנוחתם מנוחתם יקדישו את שמך ויעל מקדושתם יקדישו את שמך. And I hope that your Shabbat rest has also sanctified you. So now we turn to the Tzidakatacha, and again, I don't think we said it last Shabbat, I can't remember, but we haven't said it for a long time, because you don't say it when you don't say Tachanun, and it's on the bottom of page 239. Tzidakatacha tzedek leolam, Toratacha emet, בצדקתך אלוהים עד מרום אשר עשית גדולות אלוהים מחמוך צדקתך כראל משפטך תהום רבה אדם ובהמה תושיע אדוני. And I believe now is the moment when we insert the prayer in times of Corona. God of the Spirit of all living things, clouds of doubt are spread over us as we witness the plague continue to strengthen and the fear of death falls upon us. Ruler of the universe, thwart the plague threatening your world and do not permit such a destroyer to smite us as it comes to our homes. Remove from us all distress and fear, all worry and grief, and shelter us under the shadow of your wings. Pour out your mercy on those stricken and afflicted and strengthen and encourage the spirit of men and women who are the servants of the public health, the first responders and security forces, and all who toil for the public good, both within Israel and beyond her borders. And you, the God of goodness, who sustains the world entire with beneficence, grant blessing to the work of our hands, so that we are able to support all who are in our households with ease and without travail. Let us not ever know hunger. And so may it be your will that through and upon us is fulfilled the verses, God will preserve you from evil and will protect from you your being. God will guard your coming and your going from now and forevermore. May we all become a single and unified society, doing your will with a full heart. Lay us down to rest, Adonai our God, in peace, and our sovereign awaken us again to life. Protect our coming and going with life and peace, and now and forevermore. Amen. Aleinu is found on page 248. In Sim Shalom, and I'm not sure in the Lev Shalem. Here we are, page 231. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedola liyotzer bereshit, shelo asanu k'geratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot hadama, shelo samchakenu kahem, v'goralenu k'kol hamonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, nikavel lefan Eloheinu lirot me'ara b'tiferezecha. Kakatu v'toratecha no yimloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar v'hayarna malachot ha'aretz v'yomahu yenu echad u'shemo echad. I know Marlise is in Avilut. Is there anybody else in Avilut? Marlise, Irv? Can we unmute Irv?
Yeah,
Okay, would you like to lead the Kaddish?
sure. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbah,
Amen.
V'yamadi v'rach Yerusei v'yamlik malchusei v'chayechon v'yamachon v'chay the whole Beis Yisrael b'agalau zman korif Yiru Amen.
Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Me'amaya.
Shmei Rabba v'vorach le'omem homaya. Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yisfarar v'yisraman v'yisnasei v'yisadar v'yishalev v'yishalal shemei kudashah b'rechu.
Rechu.
Leila bin kol berchusa v'shurasa tushbachasa v'nehemasa damiran v'yamav v'yamru amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya v'chaim oleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
Amen.
Ose shalom b'mroma Uyaseh shalom oleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
Amen. Shkoach. And now we're going to do a little bit of study, and I'm going to just move my computer so I can sit down. And just get a couple of things ready here. And okay. Well, it just happened. It wasn't intended this way. I didn't ask, but this happens to be next week is my bar mitzvah parsha. And for those of you who listen to Jen Lowe talk about her bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah parsha and the story about it, mine wasn't nearly as exciting. I went to a conservative shul where we didn't lane from the Torah, so I never learned to lane. And where we didn't give a drasha, so I didn't learn to give a drasha when I was young. And I had what was called a b'nai mitzvah. I was sharing it with another young man who happened to be the son of the president of the shul. So you can imagine where the spotlight shone. And the haftarah for Kedusha is rather short, and I did half of a short haftarah. And I also led Ashrei, which is probably why to this day I like to sing Ashrei and to make sure that I recite it three times a day. But besides that, as I grew older and I saw that the Parsha Kedoshim was usually combined with Acharei Mot as it was this year, my general lack of enthusiasm for the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, was emphasized as we read Acharei Mot. So what Joanna read today, the chapter 16, is all about Yom Kippur, but it's all about the ritual, the temple ritual, the cultic ritual of Yom Kippur, not at all anything about the psychological elements that make it meaningful, or at least make it meaningful for me today. Chapter 17 of Acharei Mot is about sacrifice in what I will call disgusting detail. So if you thought that Tazria Metzora was a lot of not particularly pleasant stuff to read about, read chapter 17 in Acharei Mot. Read it enough, and maybe you'll become a vegetarian like me. Chapter 18 is all about the laws of incest and sexual perversion, which, as you know, we read on the afternoon of Yom Kippur. And I understand why those laws are there. But again, it is not the most uplifting reading. But then you get to chapter 19 of Vayikra, which is the beginning of Kedoshim. And it is, to my way of looking at it, perhaps the most uplifting chapter in the entire Torah, maybe in the entire Tanakh. Because the chapter, for the most part, not exclusively, focuses on moral principles. And this is great contrast, a stark contrast to the rest of Vayikra, so much so that I wonder, without any basis for saying so, whether it came from the same source as Vayikra, which is sometimes known as Torat HaKohanim, the Torah or the book of the Kohanim, the priestly writing, which at least critical biblical scholars think was written at a different time and by different authorship than much of the rest of the Torah. So if you'll turn, and I'm going to share my screen right now, I hope. Yeah, there we go. Not yet, hold on. Okay, let's try to do it this way. Share screen. And I know it's there. There it is. Okay. So for the first time, I made a source sheet from Sfaria. I need a little help doing that in the future to make it better, but I've copied pretty much what I wanted to. And I want to read the some of the verses together, and I'd like you to participate. So I do want to ask you some questions about it, but I will say that I want you to note the parts, the words that I have in bold. And anybody who can figure out why I have them in bold, you can raise your hand, shout it out right away, and then we'll come back to it later on. If you know right now, you won't be spoiling anything, you can go ahead. Tybal raised her hand, so maybe she has an idea already.
Because I think that one can derive the Big Ten, known in English as the 10 Commandments, from the Holiness Code, but you can't do the reverse. I'm guessing that you put in bold anything that also shows up in the Big Ten.
Well, that would have been a great idea. And what you said is true, that the 10 Commandments are all here, although we're not going to be focusing on that particularly, but that's not what I bolded. So it's still out. We've got a siren going, and my son's dog likes to howl when sirens are going.
Yeah, because he thought I was really right.
Yeah, she did. Stevie thought you were really right. No, but I'm going to go ahead and we're going to read verse 2. And verse 2 says, Diber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael va'amarta alehem kidoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. And I bolded the kidoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Elohechem. And in English, it speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, y'all should be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the most important word in that law, in that verse to you? And I'll tell you afterwards what I think is the most important word. Yeah, Diane.
So this one is in the plural. This is addressed to the entire congregation, and the first one's in the singular. So we are commanded to be holy, each of us individually, but also holy collectively.
All right, I can stop right now. We can go home. We can do Mariv and we'll all be done early. But Diane's got it. But she probably heard my drasha on this issue, on this parsha about 4 years ago. It's to you. It's you all shall be holy. It's clear here, although I will admit not every verse in this chapter is in the plural, but most of them are, that God is addressing the community. We have a communal responsibility to be holy, is my read, my take on all of this. And I think that that's what's introduced in the very first verse. Now, I will tell you that I did not go in the direction of some of the commentary, which was they connect this being holy to the previous chapter, which, if you recall, is about permitted sexual relations. And they are saying the way you're holy is by not engaging in perverse sexual relations. But some of the commentators also see this in the way that I did, or I should say I see it in the way they did, starting with Rashi. And so usually I think Rabbi Schatz or others ask for volunteers. If I have a volunteer to read the Rashi on 19:2:1, if I don't see a volunteer, I'm just going to read myself. So I'll read myself. Rashi is speaking to the beginning, Diber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, and he says this, the addition of the words kol adat, teaches us that this section was proclaimed in full assembly because most of the fundamental teachings of the Torah are dependent on it, contained in it. In other words, what Tybal was saying is that not only the 10 Commandments are here, but pretty much everything you need to know is here. And so God is saying to Moses, make sure you tell this to everyone because everybody needs to know this. And I would add, they need to know this as a community, and they need to know this as individuals. Chizkuni, which some of you know is my favorite commentator, has a very similar read on this. And I don't know how she does it because I only see about 4 faces up there. Any volunteers? You can just jump in. All right, so we move along. Chizkuni says that he's speaking about the same words, Diber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, speak to the entire congregation of the children of Israel. This verse teaches that this legislation, interesting use of the term legislation, was revealed to the whole people while they were all assembled. What is the reason for this? Because so many laws are contained in it that address all the people in their daily lives. I find that way of putting it, all the people in their daily lives. In other words, both as a community, but also as individuals in their daily lives. Our author enumerates a synopsis of all these laws commanded in the 37 verses of this chapter, showing how even the 10 commandments were repeated here also. So I did not refer to commentators in the rest of what I'm reading here. So I'm going to pick up with verses 3 and 4, and you'll notice there's nothing bolded in 3 and 4. And 3 is very simple. You shall each revere his mother and his father and keep my Sabbaths. I, the Lord, am your God. There are at least 3 things to note about this verse. Anyone want to guess or have any ideas? What are the 3 things that either should stand out, or maybe will stand out to you? Yes, Taibo.
I'm blocking on which proverb it is, but there's one of the proverbs that says you should listen to the Torah of your mother and the Musar of your father, which has always been interesting to me, that the Torah word goes with mother and Musar goes with father. But here, the parents are listed individually.
And what about in the original 10 commandments? How are they listed?
I think it's father first, but I don't remember both of them.
It is. It's father first. So that's one thing that happens here is you have mother before father. And there are tons and tons of midrashim and commentaries about why that would be, including what you've just described as well. Do you see anything else that stands out in the verse? So you hit one.
Well, it also talks about keeping God's Sabbath, and it's
right
in the same sentence as revering your parents.
Right, Marlies, right? Is that Marlies? Okay, right. So, right. Isn't that interesting? Why we have kibud av v'em or em va'av here in the same sentence as keeping the Sabbaths. And again, we could explore that and talk about why those 2 things seem to go together. And what's the third thing that we see in this verse? All you have to do is keep reading. It's one of the many verses in this chapter, which ends with similar, almost identical, or sometimes identical, sometimes slight variations on Ani Adonai Elohechem. Now, again, we can talk about why the different verses end with that, but throughout the entire chapter, we're given a commandment. And what's the reason for the commandment? The commandment is because I am the Lord your God. And what do we take from that? I mean, okay, big deal. You're telling us you're the boss. But I think it's more than that. Marshall.
Well, I want to just go back for a second, Larry, to the question as to why the Shabbat and Isha Vivi Imoti Ra'u are together. If you take a look at the actual Hebrew text itself, at the beginning of the Chizkuni, it says, Melamed Parasha Zo, it teaches that this paragraph or section, Ne'emra Bichnos Ke'aseret HaDibrot, are related as was done with the Aseret HaDibrot, that the 10 Commandments and this section is also done with a full assembly of the people. And if you look at the Aseret HaDibrot, we know that the 4th of the Aseret HaDibrot is the Shmirat HaShabbat, keeping the Sabbath, and the fifth one is honoring one's parents. So maybe that's why they're juxtaposed here in this particular text.
That's a good point. And Marshall, I would even say this adds to what I think it was Taimala was saying. Whereas the mother and father are switched, here the order of the two mitzvot are also switched. Because here we have the honor your parents or revere your parents before Shabbat, whereas in the giving of the Seder Dibrot back in Shemot, it's the other way around. So we could explore that some more. Tybal, did you want to add something?
If I may. So as I'm sure everybody knows, sometimes when you prepare something you've looked at before, you see you get worked up about something different. And I was when I was preparing to lead the Seder this year, I got very interested in the 5 covenants in Tanakh and which ones had an oath, a sign, and which one actually turns out doesn't. So to me, this also jumps out because Sabbath is one of the two signs for the covenant at Sinai.
Okay, indeed. So that would suggest why it was here at the top of the list. Okay, Diane, and then we're going to move on so we can close on time.
So if you look at that verse and you think about where people learn to keep Shabbat, they learn it at the table of their parents. So maybe this is, you shall revere your mother and father because that's where you learned about Shabbat.
And not only, I love that. And not only, it's the first of the commandments here that we actually have in this list. And what's the reason? Exactly what you said. It's because whatever you're going to do, whatever these laws happen to be, you're going to learn first from your house. You're going to learn first from your mother and father, whether it's keeping the Sabbath, or if we move to the next verse, not making idols. In other words, practicing good behavior religiously in terms of worshiping, which is in the 4th verse, which you'll notice there's nothing bolded there. By the way, I'm skipping verses 5 through 8. I did want to talk about it a little bit, only to mention these are cultic verses, which I believe, though I have no support for them, were inserted. That there was a insertion here. I don't believe that they are consistent with the rest of the verses. Maybe one year I'll give a Devar Torah about that, or we can have a study about that. You can take me to task and tell me I have no basis for saying so. But I'm jumping to verse number 9, which is, and I'll read only in English quickly, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest, teaching us that we've got to take care of the poor in our community. Verse 10 basically does the same thing. I won't read it here. Verse 11, you shall not steal, and you shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another, combining again 2 of the 10 commandments. Nothing bolded here, but teaching us about good community behavior that we're supposed to practice as individuals. Verse 12, you shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I am the Lord. Here we've got that again. I'm moving on quickly in the interest of time. 13, you shall not defraud your fellow. You shall not commit robbery. Notice that you shall not swear falsely by my name is bracketed by, in the previous verse, you shall not steal and act deceitfully. And then in verse 13, you shall not defraud your fellows. You shall not commit robbery. Those two things would seem to be similar, and they're both sandwiched around. You shall not deal false. You shall not swear falsely by my name. But the end of verse 13, the wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. Again, you shall practice good business behavior. And now we get to verse 14. And you'll notice there's some bolding. Lo tikalel cheresh v'lifnei iver lo titein michshol. V'yareta me Elohecha ani Adonai. And what's bolded is, you shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. Okay, I've always liked that phrase, but why did I bold it? No ideas yet. Next phrase, next verse. entirely bolded. I'll read it only in English for the moment. You shall not render an unfair decision, do not favor the poor, or show deference to the rich, judge your kinsman fairly. All of it's bolded. Oh, okay, Taibo, you got an idea?
Yeah, though, I didn't do so well with my first guess, but
No, it was great. The guess was great. You were right on the mark. It wasn't just what I was doing.
so could this be, going back to Diane's point, this was addressed to the community in plural, and you can't create community unless you, in English, we would say the weakest link. If you ensure that the most vulnerable will be taken care of and have a place.
I love your Torah. I really do. And in the future, with your permission, I'm going to steal your ideas if I ever write another drash on this one. But that's not why I did it. And it's clear that none of you have the same daily habit that I have. And I'm going to quickly go to verse 16 because we got to start Mariv in about 2 minutes. Verse 16, do not deal basely with your countrymen. And then, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. And verse 17 is bolded, lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Still nobody, not Marshall, not Joanna, huh?
Oh,
Well,
I have an idea. I don't know if I was just wondering if it had anything to do with holiness, since that was what you first.
It does have to do with, all of your ideas are great. I'm asking a question to which the idea is very specific, very, very specific. And if we go to verse 18, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Adonai is bolded, and then that's it, right? That's it. That's the only thing that's bolded. I'm just going to quickly scan if you're looking, if you've downloaded it. But now look what I've got at the very end of my handout there. That's page 5 of Sidur Sim Shalom. I don't know what page it is in the big, thicker Sim Shalom. And this is where in the morning, if you're like me and you have a routine and you say Moderni, and after Moderni you say Baruch Shel Adam, and after Baruch Shel Adam, then you say the Torah Brachot, Lasot B'divrei Torah, and then you read it. In every Orthodox prayer book, it starts with Yivarecha Hashem, Yivarecha Nai V'yishmerecha, and then the next thing is from Mishnah, Elu Devarim She'en Lahem, and the next thing is from the Talmud. Well, it really isn't, but that's another story. Elu Devarim Shel Adam Ochel B'rotei B'Olam Hazeh V'Keren Kayemet Lo L'Olam Haba V'Elohem, and goes on. But look in the middle. Look at that. Look right here. That paragraph, which doesn't appear in any Orthodox Siddur, but appears in our conservative Siddur. And what does it say? Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai lehechem lo takala cheresh v'lifnei iver, etc., etc., etc. It's extractions from this particular parsha, from this particular chapter that we're supposed to read every day, because the rabbis who put this Siddur together said, we've got to have a moral, an ethical catechism that we recite every day. And they extracted what they thought were the most, I assume, what they thought were the most important moral lessons to take out of Parshat Kedoshim that we recited every single morning. I do. I don't know about you. Maybe take a look at it, think about it. And that's what I got for you today. Anyways, Marshall, last word. You got to unmute yourself.
I'm just looking at Reuven Hammer's commentary, Larry.
Oh, yeah, please go.
This is in the Shabbat Siddur. I don't recall if it's in the weekday one.
It is.
Where he says, we must stand apart from all impurity, be it ritual or moral.
Right. And Vayikra is mainly about ritual purity. And here the rabbis, including Reuven Hammer, who Diane and I knew and were friends with, is basically saying that we need to stand apart morally, and they wanted to make sure that this was front and center every morning when you get up, when you're ready to enter davening. Anyways, thank you for studying with me. We're going to turn to the Mariv service, and if we can do it in 10 minutes. I'm going to stop the screen sharing. There we go. And let's see, the Mariv service is found in the Shabbat Sim Shalom on page 281, and is found in the Lev Shalem weekday evening service. Sorry about that. On page 264. והוא רחום מחבר עוון ולא ישכיב רבה לישיבה פה ולא יקח חמתו. אדוני הושיע למלך עינינו ויום קראנו. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב הרבים. עבד עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת. ועבדך תעשה ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל, אל מלך נאמן. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת אמת אמונה כל זאת וקיים עלינו. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה וישראל לכאן נשירה בשמחה רבה ויברכו עולם. מי כמוך בדמי מי כמוך נראה קודש נראתי לא תעשה פלא. מלכותך ברובניך בוקיים לפני משה זה אלינו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני יעקב וגלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. השכיבנו אלוהינו שלום ידינו מכינו לכם ולחסננו כשלמך. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ושלום יתעביר עולם ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד. This is one of the advantages of being asked to lead services. I do not say in my own tefillah Baruch Hashem Leolam. It is not said in Israel, and we're not going to say it tonight. So we're going to jump immediately to the Amidah, which is found on page 286. And I'll remind you to insert the paragraph for the end of Shabbat. If you're not reading from a Shabbat Sidur, a weekday Sidur, it should be an insertion there in the Atachonim paragraph. please take your time to continue. If you haven't finished your Amidah, the rest of us will continue on page 292 in the Sim Shalom. I've given up on finding the page in the Shalom. והנה אומרנו עלינו, עלינו מעשה ידינו, כונני עלינו, מעשה ידינו, כוננהו. יקריאנו ויעננו, עמו אנוכי בצרה, חפשהו וחפתהו, אורך ממשפיעהו ויראי בשועתי, אורך ממשפיעהו ויראי בשועתי. ואתה קדוש השבתי לו ישראל וקרא זלזל ויאמר, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות מלך הארץ כבודו. ותישאני רוח ושמר אחרי וכל השקדו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ונתלתני ברוכה. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צדק חלקך צדק לעולם ותורתך אמת. רצון לפניך אלוהינו ולאהבתנו, שנשמור כוחך במזה, ונזכה וניחא ונראה נרש טובה וברכה, בשני ימות המשיח וחיי העולם הבא. ויבדחו בך יודעי שמך, כי לא עזבת דרכך אדוני, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגיע תורה ויאדיר. So, we have 1 minute till we can do the Sfirat HaOmer. So we'll turn to the Aleinu on page 297. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol. ככתוב בתורתך לא ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך כל הארץ, היום ההוא הנה אחד ושמו אחד. Marlise, can I ask you to lead the mourner's Kaddish?
Yes, thank you, I will. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divra kirutei ve'amlik malchutei v'chayachon u'vyomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael v'agala u'vizman kariv v'yimru amen.
Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach v'olom me'omaya.
Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam v'olom me'omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar v'yit taleh v'yit halal shemei dekudesha brichu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran ve'alma v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
Amen. All right. If you're in Sim Shalom on page 55, we have the beginning of Sfirat Omer. Shabbat itself was the 20th day of the Omer, so you will know. Hinene muchan umzuman, hinene muchan umzuman, hinene muchan umzuman, lekayim mitzvat aseh, lekayim mitzvat aseh. כמו שכתוב בתורה, הנני מוכן ומזומן, כמו שכתוב בתורה, הנני מוכן ומזומן, וספרתם לכם ממחרת השבת, הנני מוכן ומזומן, מיום אביכם את עומר תנופה, הנני מוכן ומזומן, 7 שבתות תמימות תהיינה, עד ממחרת השבת השביעית יפרו 50 יום. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushem v'zatav v'tzivanu asfirat omer. Hayom echad ve'esrim yom shehem shlosha shvuot la'omer. Today is 21 days, which are 3 weeks of the Omer. And you all can now recite your own bracha and count the days if you've been counting. All right, so now we're going to turn to Havdalah. Maybe I got a book. Yeah, we do. This down. Match. Turn off the lights. I'm doing Havdalah over wine, lahavdil, because normally I do my Havdalah over whiskey. הנה אל ישועתי יפתח ולאבחד, כי עזיב זמרה יעל נוי וישועה, ושבתם מים בששון ממני הישועה, לאדוני הישועה על עמך בחטאך סלה, אדוני צבאות עמנו משכב לנו ולהי יעקב סלה, אדוני צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך, אדוני יושב מלכיננו ויום קוראנו.
ליהודים הייתה בשמחה וששון ויקר כן תהיה לנו.
ליהודים הייתה רב ושמחה וששון ויקר כן תהיה לנו. כוס ישועת עשה בשם אלוהי יקרא צברי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. בורא פרי הגפן די 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 די. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. בורא מיני בשמים די 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 די. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. בורא מורה האש די 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 די. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. המבדיל בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך מצל העמים, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה. ברוך אתה אדוני המבדיל בין קודש לחול. שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב. שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב. אליהו הנביא, אליהו התשבי, אליהו, אליהו, אליהו הגלעדי. משה מימינו יבוא אלינו. משיח ben David, Moshiach ben David. Shavua Tov to everybody.
Shavua Tov.
A good vach, good week. And fortunately, we'll be having next week. I'm sure we're going to have Rabbi Schatz or one of the other rabbanim back to lead the teaching and the davening.